Good afternoon. Hello. Who's there? It is Friday, the 12th of February. Hello. Going handheld today because I have a mic setup I like, and I'm using usually the SM7 that I'm talking on is part of this setup, and so I had to go extra here. M88. All right. I'm going to touch on deciphering references when we're recording remotely from people, writers and producers today. Can sometimes be tricky, and I have an interesting one. I'm in the I'm in the midst of doing a track right now, and I was talking to a the writer slash producer this morning, and it was kind of interesting. He had a reference between an '80s, the kind of a gated reverb '80s thing, and something more organic like Radiohead. And sometimes those things can be confusing. And the best thing to do is talk to people for sure. But sometimes we need to figure these things out on our own. So I thought I'd talk about maybe some ways that I go about trying to deal with that when you get things that seem to be juxtaposed sometimes. Um, all right. First off, if you are new to me, I have something called Five Fundamentals to Studio Drumming. It's a free video, free lesson. You can get it. There's a uh, URL pinned to the top of the chat on the right side there. Basically, a free lesson, 5 concepts of things to work on to get your playing together. Great for studio playing. Really important things to think about as a player, whether it's just live or in the studio. But it's basically a free lesson. So if you are new to me and you don't have that, a lot of good information. And if you do that, there's a lot of great follow up information that comes afterwards. It's all free. Lots of I think lots of super valuable stuff that will come to you. Sometimes lessons, sometimes stories, all kinds of things like that. All right. Okay. So back to song references. Okay. So this morning I got a reference of an '80s uh, sound with gated reverb, and there was some programming in this track that I'm working on, and the reference was like, well, the the sonic part is kind of there. It was a little too big for the song, but the gated reverb was wanted to add that vibe. But the song has a little more of a mellow, darker kind of Radiohead type thing. So, what do you do with that? What do you do? Where do you go? So, what we started to talk about, the first thing you need to talk about with writers and producers sometimes is differentiating between, are they talking about maybe a beat that's on a tune, um, that's maybe from a different era or something, and maybe they're getting it confused with the sound as opposed to the beat. And I find this happens a lot. Not in this particular case that I'm working on today, but some people are referencing the beat to a tune that they like, and they're confused. They're like, well, yeah, it's this thing, it's this drum, it's this that's my drum reference. And they're not really differentiating between the beat or the groove that they like and the sound that's happening. And as obviously as a player and when we're working remotely, that can get super confusing because we're thinking like, how do these two things fit together? I've had some crazy references before. Something I didn't have time, but I wanted to find it in an email, or something like Metallica meets Peter Gabriel or something like bonkers like that, which I was just like, what? Um, so the first thing to do is make sure they're referencing sonically as opposed to groove or beat. Okay, what's that? Hello, Juliet. So yeah, reference that. Next, what you can do is think, okay, when they're referencing kind of two things that are juxtaposed, is this is this a drum? Like, where in the drums can we get this sound? Is it darker sounds? Like today, I'm using this Ludwig Pioneer snare, which is definitely um, for this particular case, it's kind of more of a Radiohead sound where Phil Selway usually gets that kind of ringy, woody snare sound. So I'm thinking drum wise to get this kind of organic feeling through the drums, and I'm using a ribbon mic here, which is helping me, and that's helping how I'm combining this kind of 80s versus Radiohead thing. So dark tone here, organic wood sound. That's a Coles right there. I know you can't see it. Coles 4038 mono overhead. So that's kind of like this dark kind of organic thing happening, and then I'm bussing the snare to a gated reverb, and it's kind of an interesting tone. It's not something I would have thought of. There's also I have a little distortion happening in it, so it's not so clean 80s. So we can then start to combine drums and microphones when people have these kind of juxtaposing references. Like what is the particular thing? Maybe we want um, really dry. I'm just thinking out loud. Really dry kick and snare for a certain thing, but we have concert toms, which could be like an 80s thing or something. So it doesn't always have to be 80s, but how we go about taking two different references. Um, it's really annoying when people say like, "I want it roomy but really dry," or things like that. Uh, so we have to work with our writers on that. So here's another thing, effects, and I just kind of covered this a second ago, but we can get an organic sound, but then we could add effects later, and this again could help us um, meld two worlds together, like compression on something, like something super organic, but then it has compression. Um, Trying to think of two things that we can combine. Let's say I'm totally blanking, of course, right now. But taking effects and just blending in those effects a little bit to an organic drum sound, if that makes sense. Um, Again, so it's not overt, it's not over the top, but we're trying to blend worlds of what people hear in in um, in different drum sounds. Um, and I would say last but not least, actually the most important on this subject would be communicate with your writers and producers as much as you can, because that's really where you're going to sort it out. If you can get on a phone call, or if these are mostly email exchanges when you're remote recording with somebody, don't be afraid to ask a lot of questions. Maybe put in an email like 3 or 4 questions to try to specify what they're talking about. Is this a snare sound that you're looking for that I'm going after? Is this the bass drum sound? Is it what is it in there that they're hearing that they're wanting you to capture? Okay, best bet is to get on the phone. So this morning I got on the phone with the writer of the track I'm working on now. So there was an 80s reference and the kind of the modern organic kind of almost Radiohead-ish thing, and we talked about like, well, what is it in there that you're hearing? And it was really just the gated reverb thing that was the 80s reference. It was really nothing else. Didn't want it too bright, didn't want it too huge and massive, so I'm playing quite lightly. This can be part of it too, the how you actually play the track, because if let's say we want gated reverb kind of 80s, but we actually play quite light, because most 80s drumming is quite bombastic and heavy to break through those gates and things like that. So I'm playing quite light. I have these darker sounds, but then we had this interesting gated reverb thing happening. So I know I keep referencing that. Um, let's say somebody said, I want a Bonham sound with James Brown. All right. So what does that mean? Is it that they want this big, huge, massive sound, but they want the touch of, let's say, a Clyde Stubblefield thing, or vice versa? Do they want the kind of bombastic Bonamy thing, but they don't want it to sound huge? They want it to sound maybe tighter, right? Maybe that's a ridiculous reference, but sometimes I get things like that through email. Anybody have questions about this? Go ahead and hit me with questions if you got questions. Or if anybody's dealt with things like this. But overall, I would say the best thing you can do is communicate. I'm trying to think of maybe a brush. I was doing something recently. There was a reference to the band Elbow in a certain part, but the sounds were totally out of that ballpark. Because again, that's, yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I don't want to blab on saying nothing. But anybody have questions about this topic here? Yes, no. Julian? Anyone? Maybe it's only me. Maybe it's only me that has this issue. I doubt it though. All right, sorry, I don't mean to stall. What else can we do? Yeah, so combine touch. Think about touch. Think about how you hit the drums. That can differentiate our sound a lot. Combine our sounds, dark cymbals. Dark cymbals. Think about juxtaposition of what we need here. What's being referenced. So particular things in the reference. Is it roomy? Is it dry? Is it the beat or the part? Different. Can you play it with different, sticks or brushes or things like that? All right. Helpful to anyone? Yes, I got 3 likes out of the 9 people that are here, so I'll take that as a high percentage. And maybe this will be a super short one today, unless we have any questions. Nope. Okay. I have an introduction to recording course. It's available through my website. If you are new to drum recording, it's really detailed on recording with 1 mic, 2 mics, 3 mics, 4 mics, 6 mics, Beatle setup, talking about bass drum, different mic setups for your bass drum and how those can make different sounds, mono versus stereo overhead, checking phase, things like that. So it's a great course if you're new to recording drums. It's available. You can find it through my website. It's called Introduction to Recording. And all right, I guess that's about it today. Short one. I'll be back with some more produced videos soon. I've been trying to play catch up with myself. A lot of things going on. So, all right. Hope everybody's good. Hope this was a bit informative to us today. And that's it. All right. Goodbye. All right. Question. There we go. Stefan. Okay, good question. I usually try to make, if there's going to be gated sounds, first of all, I want to hear them on my side, to give myself a frame of reference and vibe. And part of what I try to provide for people is, if I can send you the sounds with the effects and everything, and you don't have to do anything on the other side, you're like, wow, that's it, then great. So, but I also provide the option of, if they don't want that, if they don't want the reverb or the gated reverb or the compression or things, the way I'm sending files is they don't have to use them. They can just mute them. So they're printed separately, and the option is there if they like my choices. And of course, things may change if I get a more stripped down demo and things are going to be added. Then maybe my effects don't work in their final production. But if I'm getting a pretty full production, like everything's done except the drums, then I try to make good choices on sounds that will work in the production, and hopefully they dig it. And if not, they just have my drums, and they can do that, do what they want with it. Hopefully that helps. But that's a great question. I will hang out for another minute since I got a question here. If anybody else wants to expand on that, or Gil, you can let me know if that was helpful, or Stefan. All right, cool. Right on. Glad that helped. All right, 30-second countdown. Type your questions. Yeah, I liked. I was. Oh, you know what? Actually, in my Patreon, I'm currently making a video about this, about how I like to make headphone mixes to what the final production and vibe might be, and how I use that to track. Because I was doing that last week. I had something that was super soupy, reverby, kind of 60s, like Portishead, or even though that's not 60s, but drawing from those super soupy ambient sounds, and how that affects your playing, which is super important if if that's where it's going to land, final production wise, even though you may not be producing it, you can put yourself in that space as a player by hearing it through your headphones. So that's coming out on my Patreon this weekend. All right, that's it, I think. All right, everybody, take care. Have a good weekend. I'll see you next week for sure. All right, bye.